Hey, Carol.
Hey, Mara, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fine.
So I got everybody. I'm going to mute you in a second. I'm just waiting. We've only got one in person so far and you online. So I'm just going to wait until we have a quorum.
Okay, well, I've got you just for a second.
Yeah.
Your emails have started all of a sudden going to my spam folder.
Lots of people have been saying that.
Yeah, and I keep moving it to inbox. Mark is not spam, et
And it's
cetera,
still
et
going.
cetera. Yeah, and it still keeps going there. Now, Kelly's were doing that for a while, but then they quit, and I don't know why.
Okay. I'll talk to IT and try to figure it out. I had a couple other people say the exact same thing. They didn't get any of my emails and they all went to spam.
Yeah, so I just, heads up.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm going to mute you, mute us momentarily until we get a few more people in here.
Okay.
Carol and Michael, I just wanted to let you know we've got 3 in person and the 2 of you, which gives us a basic quorum, but I'm going to wait a couple more minutes. We don't have our chairperson yet. Okay. And if not, Angela gets to be vice chair and gets to be chairperson again. So we'll hold on just a couple more minutes.
died and the family sold it. And so it's a rehabber that's going to, probably going to go in front of your committee here for so long, hopefully. They get that far, you know.
Hopefully they just fix up with it. Is it a nice up or?
Oh.
Where are you all connected?
Needs a
So,
lot of work.
oh.
Needs a lot of work. We actually thought it would be a tear down, actually. That's what
Oh,
we
really?
were anticipating.
Anne, can you hear us?
It's in historic
Okay.
districts.
You have your quorum, so if you wanted to get started.
Okay. Sorry, let me pull my agenda up.
And actually, if you wanted to, we do have a new member. So if you wanted to do and have everyone do introductions first before we got to the beginning of the agenda, you could.
Okay. I think it's Sue.
Yes, hi Ann. Good to see you again.
You too. So Sue, introduce yourself.
I'm Sue Indelicato. I live at 460 West Lockwood. I've lived in Webster since 1988. And I met Ann because of our mutual interest in historic houses. And so that's pretty much it. I'm retired, so I have a lot of time.
Check all the boxes. It's awesome.
And then if everyone else wants to just
Yeah.
introduce themselves.
Doug Stanley, and I've been on the commission for quite a while. I dropped off for about, I don't know, a year or so, but then I thought this was a passionate thing that I liked, so I came back. And I live on Mason over by the library behind it, and been there since 2002 and in Webster since 1995.
I'm Angela Thompson and I live on Rock Hill Road. You've lived here a long time. I live where the gargoyle used to be.
Yeah.
So what else about me? I've been on the board. I don't think a year, not even a year. So less than that, something maybe last fall I started. So, but I am also on the architectural board.
I'm Michael. I'm sorry, full disclosure, I spaced out for like a minute because I'm sitting upstairs in our attic right now and it's 83 degrees and I can't figure out why our area isn't working. So I'm also like trying to figure out what the AC people that live right across the street from us are. I live over in Larson Park, right next door to it. I've been on, I think since April of last year. Really? Wow. That's crazy. So I've been on here more than a year now. That's nice. That's all I got. I'm sorry.
I'm Carol Denke. I live on Simmons Avenue and my house is turning 100 this year. Yay. I'm an architect. I've been on the Historic Preservation Commission for just less than 6 months. And I'm also a member of the Architectural Review Board.
I think that leaves me. I'm Steve Stovall. I live on Rock Hill Road, about Baker with the crazy gardens. I've been on the commission 3 years, I think, ish.
All right. Well, I mean, Sue knows me, but I'm Ann. And I've been on the commission for several years now. Live in a century home, got my century plaque. I'm passionate about this. So I'm also experiencing heat-related issues in my house. So I'm so sorry if you guys hear the fans behind me. I'm gonna like mute this. But welcome, Sue. We're happy to have you.
Thanks, Ann.
And then Anne, for those that don't know, when the new council comes on, they reassign all of our council liaisons. So we have a new council liaison. So Emily, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure, I'm Emily Shepherd, new council person and liaison to this board, and I'm excited to be on it. And Ann and I have little ones that are going to be classmates next year.
Yep, Gibbons Gray Wolves.
Yep. So yeah, just still learning. So here to learn from everybody and to see how I can help as the council liaison.
All right, well, thank you guys all for showing up. It's so disgusting outside. So I guess to start things off, we didn't have a meeting last month because we did not have a quorum. So we're gonna do approval of the April minutes.
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay,
And we'll go ahead and have Sue will abstain because she wasn't here at that meeting. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Thank you.
okay, so tonight we don't have any public hearings. Do we have any visitors?
No visitors.
Okay. So moving on to new business, we do have a demolition recommendation for 319 Revis Place.
So you all should have received the link in the packet. Those of us that are here have a hard copy of it. Hopefully the rest of you have the link to look at the PDF. The house is a single family dwelling that was built in 1924. We don't have any records pertaining to a historic inventory sheet for the property. The property had not been previously identified on any of our at-risk property lists. It's a one-story bungalow that was identified in county's records as about 672 square feet. They purchased it in May of 2022 with the intent to demolish it. The property had been owned for over 30 years by the previous occupants. And then you'll see in the packet, there's some photos of the structure and some additional information that's in our normal packets. Staff did not have any recommendation or had found anything that would recommend holding this for additional review.
So I just have one thing that I'd like to say.
Yeah.
Just because I'd like to say this. I don't think there's anything we can do to save this house, first of all. But when I applied to be on the commission, I was asked the question by the city council, what can we do to save little houses? Well, the only thing that I've ever, and the answer I wanted to give at the time, but wasn't going to because it seemed inappropriate, was that the only thing you can do is to not allow developers to come in and purchase those homes. And well, you don't make it so that it is financially a better deal to tear it down and build a big house. That's all you can do. That's it. You can say it's historic and you can say this and you can say that. But at the end of the day, you're just putting some sort of regulation on it. No different than we put regulations on things all the time. That's all we can do. So since we do have a board member here, I want to just say that because it is all that can be done. It's something that in historic preservation, I've worked in historic preservation for about 25 years as an architect. It's a shame, you know, you see the situation as sometimes people will simply be using historic preservation to save something that they'd like to save and they feel like they can't say anything else. Well, we'll just say it's historic. You know, I mean, that's pretty much what happened. Oh, right. And so if Webster Groves wants to remain a certain sort of character to it, there has to be some regulation to it. That's just the way it is. So we may not like the idea of saying, no, you can't do this, or no, you can't do that with your property, but we do it all the time. We, you know, nobody in Webster Groves is allowed to park a car in their yard. God forbid that you'd have to live next to that, you know, no one would do that. So there's all kinds of things we tell people that can't do every day. I'd like to see something that tells a developer, you can't just come in and, you know, it's not going to be this great financial coup because you can buy an old house in Webster, tear it down and throw up your vinyl siding, cheap old house that in 20 years will need to be replaced. So, you know, that's just the way it is. That's the situation. So one thing that I know in the Main Street program that I heard recently is that the Main Street people who are wanting to fix up their old downtown, they're often told, you want to fix it up, but you don't want it too nice because you'll lose all your character. You'll get the people that are coming in to simply try to make a buck off the situation that we've got wealthy people moving in and we want their money, right? So in a way, you have to say no sometimes to the situation that's going to be, that seems more financially, beneficial in the short term is not going to be beneficial in the long term for the community character, I guess. So I just wanted to say that. I don't think personally there's anything we can do about this right here, but just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Have you seen other areas that have put in regulations that have worked to kind of stave
Yes.
off some of this?
It's done all over the country. So for instance, Oak Park, Illinois, a lot of people know all about Oak Park, right? They got a lot of regulations. They got a lot of money there, but they have a lot of regulations, what you can and can't do. They don't let anybody change their window. Never. You
We
could
have
not
that
put
too.
vinyl siding on an old house to save your life. That does not happen, so there's all kinds of places put in a lot more regulations than we do. And for tearing down homes, they do different kinds of things, all kinds of stuff is done. And it's something I think that maybe we should think about. I don't know. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm one person in all Webster Roads, so maybe not everybody.
I don't
feels
think,
that way.
I don't think it's a unique feeling at all, and kind of, there is like a little bit of feeling of like, well, what can you, kind of throwing up hands, and I know we've done some things recently with like, square footage requirements and setbacks and things like that, and I would be happy to explore more.
Yeah, the hard part with this is it is that fine balance of the people who lived here have a right to sell and make a buck and have a right to sell to the highest bidder. And so us as a city can't necessarily, it's that crazy balance of, I think all of us agree, we want to keep the historic character, which includes houses that don't have some major historic element to them, but are still part of the overall fabric of what is built in our community. But at the same time, we also are going to have, like, if these people had sold it for someone to live in it and have to do additions to it, they wouldn't have gotten the money that they got. And they might have been a couple that this was their last sort of thing that provided them with their next, their thing to go on to retire with. And so there is that fine balance between the two that I think we struggled with. And I know we had changed it a couple of years ago. So it used to be that a house like this wouldn't have even come to you. It used to be that anything, unless it turned 100 years old, it didn't even come in. And this extra step, I'm getting developers griping to me
Oh, I'm sure
that
developers.
this extra step to have to actually put all this paperwork together, have an inspection of the house so we can confirm that it really is in the condition that they say it is. That extra step is frustrating them. I don't think it's necessarily stopping them, obviously.
No, they make way
But
too much money.
it's an extra step that, again, it's an extra regulation. And it's the question of how much farther you want to go with regulations.
So the thing about that is they can do it now. But for the people who still live there, and in particular, say younger people who have bought in the neighborhood, their property values will go down. So it's just the way it is. You get too many of these new houses popped up among the others. That's not a nice character. So it goes down eventually. It doesn't for the people who are selling right now. And that's, I guess, what I mean by the short term and the long term.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I don't know what you can do. Some communities or neighborhoods will even come together and say, well, this group of 2 streets of small homes, we don't want any big homes here. We're all going to live here for however long we think. And I don't care if I get more money. I don't want a huge house next to me. So my house might not be that. And so communities will let them make a district that's more of a conservation district is what it's often called. And the regulations are different, but that group of people decides what are their regulations going to be in their neighborhood, because they want that neighborhood small, and they want small homes, or they want whatever it is, whether they want their house to all look the same. I know there's I think it's in Atlanta where there's one where the houses all look very much the same, and they want them to stay that way. They don't want people coming in and changing it because they don't want to live next door to it. right, they want it, so just something to think about. It's very difficult to tell the old couple who's saying, we always, the last few years, we knew this is our nest egg. Well, I don't know what you do there, that is a problem, but at the same time, they wouldn't get, I don't know, that's a difficult situation, I understand that. But there has to be kind of a time when it stops, because somebody else isn't gonna get what they want out of their house at the end of the day, so. It's just the way it goes, right, so. Someone,
Mara, can I ask you a question? Because I feel like with the housing market that the way it is, and I've heard from several of my neighbors that they get postcards in the mail or solicitations from the "will buy your house as is cash," and they're really targeting either low income or elderly people who are maybe looking to move on, but they're like, I have to fix my house up in order to sell it. I don't know how I'm going to do that. They get solicited, and like for an older person, some of these mailings are like, they look handwritten or they look very personable, which is very deceiving. And I guess, have you seen or have you heard of anything within the city with like elderly people being solicited by these buy your house as is cash, and then say they do that transaction and then they turn around and just sell it to a developer? I mean, like, I guess I feel like that's something that's happening more, and I'm just wondering if that's something that's happening within our city and how that affects
So
houses
So-
like this that might not be historic but are old and part of Webster's history.
So I'd say one, no, I've only seen one or two where it's been sold to one person and then sold to the next person, because we see that chain as we're working with someone when they come in for permits. So I have not seen some abundance of that. And also tell you, I don't think it's just the elderly and others. I mean, I think they look to see how much you paid for your house when you bought your house. I get voicemails all the time. I get voicemails, I get texts, I get emails. I don't know how they get all my information, but they know I live in Webster and I get offers on our house all the time.
We get mailing.
I get at least 3 or 4 of those little mailers every week, and you're right there. The
Yep.
first time I got it, I was like, damn, somebody's actually oh, no, that's just a font that they chose that makes
Right.
it look handwritten.
To look like a pen.
Yeah, so
Right.
even though I don't think they're targeting the elderly necessarily, I think they can go through the system and look through and see what people bought the house for and how long they've been there and what the trend is for people moving out of various communities. So I think that it's going to be a difficult thing. It's going to be a very, very difficult thing. We've had conversations before in the past about, what kind of additional education can we give to people to help them to be able to maintain their home? But we can't, and we've talked with neighbors before of, if you know that there's someone on your block who can't take care of their house anymore, why aren't you offering and this happened like 5 or 6 years ago when we had a really big, beautiful house that came down, and it came down so they could put 2 houses up. And the neighbors just kept saying later, well, we knew he couldn't take care of it. And, it was growing, the grass was growing up, and no one took the time to offer to help that neighbor. So, it was the neighbors were complaining, and yet they weren't a part of the process. So I think it's a difficult one. I'm not sure where the city falls in. I'm not sure where, at this point, we're still not yet at the level, which people always say, of Kirkwood. We're not at the level of entire, blocks coming down one after the other. It's still pretty scattered. It's still, I should probably try to give you a map. I think it's been about a year since we updated the council with it, but we do a GIS map and we map out all the houses that are new builds. And there's no cluster in any particular area. It really is scattered all across the city. And then we did do some mapping of like how old they were, what square footage they were originally. And it is going to be, they're going to look for the 672 square foot house. Because when you think about that, the 672 square foot house, even though it might have a really big lot, it's not going to sell for very much. So, you know, someone might think it's a big windfall to get $200,000 for a 672 square foot house on a lot. But because they know what they can put onto it. We did make some changes recently so that the smaller lots, so a lot of the smaller houses are on smaller lots. We did make a change in the codes just in the last year that limit the size of houses on the smaller lots. It used to be you were still guaranteed, like didn't matter how small the lot was. If it was a legal lot, you could build a 2,400 square foot house. We've changed it now. So when someone comes in and comes to me about a small lot, I'm looking at it and I'm running the numbers and they can build a 1,200 square foot house or a 1,500 square foot house. So it is, I think we've done a couple things to curb certain elements, but you're still going to come to some of these with very large houses, or sorry, very large lots with a small house on it. And I don't think there's anything we can necessarily do from a certain standpoint because people have a legal right, unless it's a historic house, because people have a legal right to sell their property. So it's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
I think that's interesting what you were saying, Mara, about neighbors helping out as well. With all this like city council stuff and like learning the ropes, there's a lot that we want to do as Webster, kind of big Webster, but it's not always stuff that's going to be done in City Hall. And for me, like trying to figure out like, where's that line of like, where do we need regulations and legislation? And where is it something that like a nonprofit steps in or like communities help each other stay in their houses and things like that. So I think it's important for the whole community, but like figuring out like, how do we parse that out and what body can do what work, I think is going to be kind of an interesting process too, to figure it out.
Yeah, that would certainly be great. If the community could help people stay in a home or fix up that home so that it's appealing to homeowners because, you know, so the price for this house to me is they could have gotten that if it were fixed up, but you know, if it were livable, they could have gotten that much money, you know, that if someone would live there for that price. It's not as if they would have.
That's kind of the
So-
interesting thing to me though, is in here, there is like a real estate listing with like a description, like they're trying to sell this house, hurry won't last, broker owned. And then all of a sudden now it's gonna be demolished and have a new property built.
It depends on your, you know, glasses, whether they're a realtor's glasses or a developer's glasses.
You know, I would just having some thoughts about some really nice projects we've seen come through ARB. They aren't frequent, but I think many of us applaud them when there is a small historic home or older home that isn't necessarily a historic designation, and it's purchased by someone who intends to put up a bigger house and sell it. But they manage to retain like a large portion of the existing home. So you might have the nice front porch and the nice living room, and then step back a bit and build on a second story addition. There's one on West Glendale where they did a very nice transition of keeping the historic front of the house and then just running the roof up and making a very nice like story and a half that had a substantial number of bedrooms. It sort of walked the line between keeping some of the historic character and then having a property that was larger, a bigger home that a family could live in instead of one or two people. And there was also one recently on Gray within the last 2 years who did something very similar. And I find myself thinking, I wonder if there's some sort of incentive that the city could provide to encourage people who want to make larger houses utilize part of the existing home to maintain the character of the house and of the neighborhood. And it's also can be quite sustainable to reuse, 1,000 square feet that you already have. So that happens to cross my mind. I don't know, maybe Angela or someone else knows if there's any sort of precedence of communities around here or elsewhere that have some sort of incentives like that.
So, Carol, that house that I know exactly the project you're talking about on Glendale, because I think we all were just like, whoa, how are they, why are they doing this? This is great. How did this come up that they decided to save this front of this house that looks so simple and small and then making it a family home, right? And so I actually had, what it reminded me of as in the conservation district thing, when I had looked at that for something else, there was a community that did exactly that. So they had the area, I don't remember exactly what the thing was, but they wanted to maintain the look of a story and a half only from the front, so from the street. So that's exactly what that house was, as I recall. So it had like dormers or something, I think, didn't it? And so it just made me think like that's what Webster Groves needs, is something that you have to keep that look from the front. If you make it a bit different in the back, you can and work with it, that's a different thing. But to keep the story and a half in some of the neighborhoods where the houses are a little smaller really does make a difference. It makes it, some of these that are so tall, when the others next to them are so short, it just makes it look kind of.
So there's a house on foot right now that's going through that. The front of it is kept. I think the basic sense of the main dwelling is still there, but then the back end has been, similarly to what you guys are talking about, kind of blown out to make it a bigger home. There was also a house right over on Harper by Larson Park that just sold, I think maybe a month or two ago. Apparently I have no concept of time at this point, since I've been on here since April of last year, so I apologize if my timing is off. But they started renovations, I think, before I came on this board, because I think it was this board who might have shut them down at some point, because I talked to the people who renovated. They started, had a stop order because they were just going to take the whole house down, had the stop order, and they ended up having to keep a substantial piece of the main dwelling and again build on the back end. So I mean, it's there. I keep coming to mind as you guys talk. There's a house on the corner of Kirkham and Parsons. Mara, you and I have spoke about this house quite a few times. That's just overgrown with so much stuff. There's a door that's left open. It gets fined every time the grass goes above 10 inches or whatever it is. There's another fine that gets slapped on it. And that one just pains me, because from what I understand about that one is that when it was built in, I think, the 60s or 70s, it was built as like this can be an eco-friendly home, kind of environmentally friendly at the time. But now it's just, we've lived over here at Larson, I would say coming on 6 years, and it's been vacant that entire time.
Yeah,
So-
it's been taken forever. I remember driving by it as a kid when it was great, and just, I thought it was so cool, and the skylights and the wood.
Yeah.
And to see it now, it's like really kind of sad. I keep wondering what they're gonna do.
My
with it.
wife and I have talked. If the price was right, I don't even know
And
how I would
there's-
do it, but I would buy it and just gut it and do everything that I could myself. But
So just the reminder, as the city,
But yeah.
we don't have the right to take someone's property. They pay their taxes every year. There is no mailing address other than the mailing address of the house. There is nothing that we can do other than send a violation letter if, if the grass gets too high, and we can cut it. But other than that, unless it becomes completely unsafe, and at that point, we would basically start the process to try to notify to demolish it. We can't, we do not own the property. So trying to explain to people all the time, like, that the city doesn't Like even if it goes to back taxes, the city still doesn't own the property. So it's very hard, because again, there's people who have their own property rights. And if they do certain steps, if they don't pay for 3 years, it does go to tax sale. But even once it goes to tax sale, even if you purchase it at tax sale for back taxes, you can't touch it for a year. There's a whole year time frame that you have to wait that gives the original owner the right to come back and pay for the taxes. So you're looking at 4 years potentially of neglect or whatever that is. And there's only a certain amount that the city can do legally to do certain things. So that one's one of the ones where there's no mailing address out of town. There's no, I know different people have tried to tell me, oh, well, here's a name and we can Google that name, but you have to have certain legal rights. And then the city also can't necessarily spend $500 on a deed search just for a particular house that, again, we have no legal right to do anything with.
And
So
can I just interject here? I mean, I'm not trying to cut anybody off. I think this is extremely important discussion. But I just, before I lose my train of thought, I kind of want to go back to the property in question that we're discussing. Because there's a few discrepancies that I had seen reading through all of this, and it might be irrelevant. It might not mean anything, but looking over the memorandum where staff recommends the approval, one of the bullets in there was that the property had been owned by the previous owner occupant for over 30 years, which in the tax records, it's what, David and Catherine Wilson. One thing that struck me was in the application for demolition, I guess for the Department of Planning and Development, Boulevard Custom Homes, who filled this out. One of the things that when they filled their paperwork out, it said most recent use at property rental home. So I feel like that's a little bit of a discrepancy there.
It's actually not necessarily not necessarily discrepancy. When we look at this, we look for the occupancy permit. The last occupancy permit we had was for David and Catherine Wilson. So they may have been renting the property illegally without. So that's not necessarily a discrepancy if they were told that someone was renting it. And David and Catherine Wilson did have a mailing address in St. Clair, Missouri. But the last occupancy permit we have on file was for David and Catherine Wilson. So again, there can be things all the time. People can rent properties out. We every month get a letter from Ameren that tells us if there's a new service that's been turned on. And that's our only means of knowing if it changed hands. We don't get a regular thing from St. Louis County that says, oh, this just sold or this just sold. That is literally our only thing to know. So if they had been renting it for the last 10 years or something like that, we wouldn't have known. Because we wouldn't, or if it had been one rental person, we wouldn't have seen it in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Because we weren't getting Ameren reports.
That was just my question, because I think when I first looked through all of this, I was like, oh, they're saying it was a rental property, but then it was like owned for 30 years. And yes, it was the owners, but then also there's that real estate listing in here for Murphy Realty Group, and it's broker owner owned. And so I guess I was just trying to piece kind of that together in our discussion of why are these smaller homes subject to this, which that makes sense. Like it seems difficult to think a family owned this home for 30 years and then sold it to somebody who wants to just demolish it. But then if you kind of read between the lines, maybe they weren't there, they were renting it out and then finally decided just to sell it.
Yeah, and we have no way of knowing on county when they changed their mailing address in regards to the taxes. But we always look in our files of what our last occupancy permit is that we have on file. And that was the last occupancy permit for these people. And it was more than 30 years ago. do you want to, I know that we had the bigger discussion. Do you want to go ahead and make a decision on the demolition request?
Does anyone want to make a motion to approve demolition request for 319 Revis Place?
I move we approve the demolition request.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Anyone opposed? Okay, so another aspect of our new business is information on city website, education about preservation. And I apologize, I was not present during the April meeting and we did not have a meeting last month, so.
So this wasn't on for the April meeting.
Okay.
At the April meeting, there was a conversation about some education. I think it was kind of tied to just what we were discussing of how can we get information out to residents, older residents and other people to know a little bit more about historic preservation. And I apologize, I put in the digital packet some information, a couple of the things on our website. And then I think, Michael, you during the meeting had sent some links to me about some other pages. So I had put all of that in that packet. Just as do we want to make this another not necessarily a project, but something else that we want to work on. The city website has been updated recently, and they're going back and finding old links of things that people haven't really looked at in a while. One of those links is our city historic preservation, like couple of the pages that talk about different things, and it still has our building commissioner who used to be the liaison to here, who's been gone for like 3 years. So, it's an old PDF. It wasn't necessarily the website. So sometimes those old linked PDFs probably need a new, fresh look at them. So I just left that on there as a new business item to kind of tie into what you talked about in April, which was starting to talk about maybe what additional information could be provided on the website about preservation.
I mean, personally, I think given just the conversation that has transpired up till now during this meeting, I think it's kind of important in everybody's minds. And obviously that's not going to curtail developers or whatnot, but I think a challenge has always been when approaching people about historic designation, it's always, well, what restrictions are involved then? What can't I do to my house? What red tape do I have to go through to do this? And I kind of looked through that link and it kind of answers some of those questions. So I think that is valuable information that maybe needs to be disseminated to the community in some other way without them having to like go and seek it out themselves.
Yeah, I think it needs to be it needs to be more prominent on our website. The last architectural review board meeting, I did not have the guidelines for Marshall Place at hand. I went to look for them, couldn't find them. It took me forever to find them. I couldn't find them. I knew they were in there though, so I kept looking. But I thought, well, if I were anybody else, especially someone not really all that interested, I wouldn't have even come close to finding it.
Yeah.
And it took me a minute to figure out even where historic preservation was on the website. To me, it should be sort of very prominent. This, Webster Groves does sort of hang its hat on historic Webster Groves, and we can't get away from that, not now, it's a little late. So not that you want it to always seem like we're some group of old ladies or something like that, but you know what I mean? It needs to have a little bit more preserving the past to make the future great or whatever, all those things that everybody says these days. A little bit more of that in there so I can click and find what I need. Really easy. Like I thought this information was good. It answers a lot of questions I would guess. I know, but if it's not a click and I get to see it, no one's gonna look at it.
Yeah, it was just a PDF in the document center. That's where it was.
And, yeah, so, well, people are busy.
Does it have the new ordinance and is it updated for all the changes we made?
Yeah, but that's in a different place. That's just in the city code.
Okay.
Yeah, so the
So we
city
can
code.
focus on that.
Mhm.
I was on this board, I think Ann was too, when the house with the 2 lot where they turned it in, it was a beautiful home. Parsons place, like Parsons? or-
No, it was at Bompart and Fairview, Bompart and
Oh, that one. Oh, yeah,
no,
I'm thinking of another
no.
one.
Yeah, Doug, you're thinking of, yes, it was, Parsons.
oh,
and
that one too.
Brougham.
That
Yeah.
one too. That
Down
became
the
3
barn
lots.
and, yeah.
That became 3
Beautiful
lots.
home, and we just sat here powerless, nothing we could do about it, because it wasn't in a historic district. There weren't any rules, so now we have rules that back us up if it's historic. Including this house, if we went to the map and said, this is a historic home, it's important to keep it. We have that right now, where we didn't before.
Are you talking about the 2-story white frame house with the black shutters and the tall
Yes.
columns?
Yeah,
So that was the porch light on there had been brought from an antebellum home in the South. And I saw it in the junk pile. And I didn't think to tell him, hey, I'll give you 25 bucks for that. I wish I would have grabbed it, but I was sick about that house.
yeah.
Well, and that house actually had prominent Webster history.
Yes.
In
Yeah, yeah.
books about historic Webster. It has the little medallion in the street outside of it on
Yeah.
the walk, and now it's what, 2-3 brand new homes. So
Yeah.
but I definitely think this information is valuable because again, I think a lot of people hear historic designation and they think that, okay, that's gonna freeze my home in time. I can't do anything to it. I can't modify it in any way. I can't bring it up to, modern times. And so they just don't want to hear it. But if we're all talking about how we want to save the historic aspect of Webster, and in order to do that, maybe we do need to have more historic districts or streets or neighborhoods or whatnot. I do feel like this is extremely valuable information that needs to be more easily accessible or easy to find. But also, as Mara was saying, maybe this could become something that would be a project of ours to somehow, and I don't even know. Again, letter writing. I don't know the best way, but
Well, I think at this point, I'm sorry, I think at this point it would be taking what is in the link and either, if someone wants to take on editing the document, like if they feel that some of the document information is not good or needs to be updated, that was the city one. And then figuring out, there's a certain point where people don't want to scroll on a web page. They want to see a few key things and they want to be able to have links to get to other stuff. And so trying to figure out the best way to consolidate what's important, to provide links for other information. Just there's a few key things that we need to think about. And so if anyone wants to take that on as something that if I am given some documentation, and that's where we gave, I think, a couple other website examples, that if you have examples or something of what you would like us to do, we can then give it to the people here at City Hall who can fix the website. So if someone says to us, hey, on this page, or I've seen on this other city, they've formatted it this way and this works better. Is there a way to do that on our city website? We can work with that. So we found in the past, we've looked at other examples of other cities where we really liked what they've done, whether it's a mapping program or a photographs or whatever it is. And so figuring out what that's going to be, because they moved everything over to our new platform. They figured out based on what people clicked on the most, what were the key buttons that they needed to have the most prominent. And then there's still certain things that get moved around. So taking the time, looking at the website, telling us if there's something that you think you want us to look at or whatever. In fact, I can probably, hold on. All right. Oh, it's popping up really huge. Okay, hold on. So I don't know why it's so enormous. Okay. So I know that they recently changed it so that they would have, again, the key things that people clicked on all the time became these prominent buttons here. And then they put together some things of like some important news and announcements are staying in the middle. The calendar with meetings and events is there. And then some other things about, you know, community days or other projects. The document center is where a lot of the stuff used to be for historic. So we used to have just sort of a main folder with historic preservation, which has guidelines, which has minutes. There's historic Webster walks in here, but that was more like, we have a page that has some historic information, but then there's the document center where you can just download PDFs directly from there. I know that they put, and again, I haven't really played around with the way that they redid everything. I'm trying to remember where they did put, so historic preservation frequently asked questions. That's that document that I sent to you that's really old, that still has our old building commissioner on it. And then we still have under community, so under historic preservation, there's historic preservation in Webster Groves, benefits of historic designation, researching the history of your home, historic preservation commission itself, the walks, some frequently asked questions, historic districts, and preservation education. So again, if you kind of click on each of them, some of them just go to pages like the awards of excellence. Yeah, there isn't a lot of information on those pages. So if someone wants to take the time to look at these and make a decision like benefits of historic designation, there's a document that's in here that might have some great information. But again, it's sort of like they just went ahead and linked things back over that had been linked a long time ago. And whether they had necessarily been updated or looked at, we're finding some older documents that they're pulling off as they did the migration. So if there's, you know, anyone, if you want to create it as a new project, if you want to look at some other information.
So I didn't really have any trouble. I don't have a problem with the information that's available. But so when I went to look for that, it took me a long time before I looked under community to find it.
Yeah.
Like it just, that wasn't natural to me. And maybe I'm different than everybody else. I have no idea. But to look there wasn't the first thing I did at all. It was far down the road. So, and I eventually went to that document center where, because I knew the city charters there and all that stuff. But so I don't know what different headings up there, but the headings to me weren't, I liked them before. It was easier to find stuff than it is now.
Yeah, and they had a whole group that determined that those were not easy to find, and
So
yeah.
I guess I don't know. So government and departments don't seem that different to me. But whatever. So I don't know what you're gonna do. How you have a bunch of things that fits all that stuff you've got up there.
Yeah, and I know they went through seeing other cities, which ones worked better, looking at, you know, how many different, what people clicked on the most, what they needed the most. I think it's always going to be difficult because people are going to have a hard time finding. So that's why we do have our nice little, like, if you type in.
Yeah, maybe that's even what I did.
And then you're going to come up with your search box. Legislation, education, preservation, explore history, historic preservation code. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I think it's difficult for every community to try to figure out like, how do they put these things together? How does someone find stuff?
Yeah, I don't know what to
Yeah.
say about it either, because you certainly can't put historic preservation like that's what everyone goes there for. It's not common in
Yeah.
reality. You're there to look, when is the trash coming today or not, more
Yeah.
than anything else. So I don't know. It's just, it was a. It does seem like that we need some other way to make people aware.
See, I was thinking if you want to be more proactive, we have a Facebook page, right? Webster Groves does. I mean, you could put some posts with links there. And, you know, maybe the page that we get in the Webster Kirkwood Times have a brief article on where to find things. Historic preservation, maybe in the, there's another place I was thinking of, and I can't.
So if this group has things they want to put together, they just share it with staff and we can figure out ways. So we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram account,
There you go.
we have a Twitter account, and then just know in the past. So the Historic Preservation Commission in the past did have a little bit of money in their budget and did a few other little projects. So like I have this, so if you saw on the one document, it has that LEAP, the LEAP. We do have like a box of fans that they gave out one community days to people that talked about preservation. I have a huge box of those.
So I'm feeling we'll have definitely need for a fan.
You might need to have a fan for the 4th of July. And so there were some other things that have been used in the past. They did do some a lecture series. It was semi well attended, but it required a lot of money to put it on. So it might be that there are additional little things. So if someone thinks about something that you want to add to Facebook or add to Instagram or add to Twitter, or hey, did you know about this? We can add articles to the monthly page that goes in the Webster Kirkwood Times. They try to balance it out with important things that need to be based on the timing. So it's just your group telling us what do you want to use or share.
Can we use the Historical Society to get some information out too? Because they get inquiries and things all the time that I'm sure really fall under the cities.
Yeah, Mara, didn't I see somewhere that Laura Arnold would like to have somebody on the HPC also be a member of the historical?
So I asked that in my email and I asked that at the April meeting and no one stepped up from this group. So she did appoint Ron Zager to be the appointee from the mayor to the Historical Society's board. So there is someone who's been appointed. It doesn't have the cross, I don't want to call it pollination, but the cross, that they had originally wanted, because I think everyone had already said, we already have a couple members who are already dual commission members. And I think other people didn't feel that they had the time necessarily. But someone did get appointed.
Okay.
Have you thought about doing a city chat?
They could, but again, it comes down to what are you going to say in the city chat? Yeah.
But that's something too that like we've done for traffic. There was like a meet the new mayor. So on Facebook, they'll do like a Facebook Live. If you're not familiar with it, and it's usually like Dr. Peoples, maybe a staff member, somebody from council, maybe somebody else, like somebody from the police department for traffic, and have like a group of maybe 4 panelists that kind of talk about that topic, and then people can type in questions as well. And they're recorded, so you get a few people who watch them live, but then you get a lot of people relatively.
Yeah, I
who
watched
watch
the
them.
traffic one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
So if
good.
you had content or something that you wanted, if you knew what you wanted to talk about, that's another forum that you could get a slot in.
So do lots of people look at them? I mean,
It's relative, right? So like
Yeah,
maybe
it is.
11 people that watch it live or something, but then you've got 3 digits who watch the recording,
oh, really?
maybe.
So a
Did you
few
say
hundred
Mara?
people, which is.
I'm actually not involved in them at all, so I have no idea. Yeah, Jenny takes care of them. And I don't do everything in the city. And I actually haven't, the one chat that was gonna be about planning, Danny, my planner, when he was here, he actually did it because I was sitting on a beach, and I wasn't here. And so I was told that I did not have to do it from the beach, even though I did watch it from the beach. So yes, I mean, that would be something that it's, I don't know how much it's watched. I know that in the back, like I can go into the back of our Explore Webster Groves page but I don't have, for the Facebook page, I don't have back access to the city's Facebook page. I know on our Explore, I can see the data of like how many views videos and posts and other things have. And we've built up a following. We've built a pretty good following so far. And it's just trying to do all the platforms because we didn't really have the content to do some of the other things. And those have been added in the last year and a half. But we need information or people to talk or content ideas.
So then we'd have to have a topic, right? I mean, sort of we have a topic.
I mean, the topic could just be historic preservation and you say, here's where you find it on the website. Here's like the tours that were coming up and where you can find other tours and the benefits of having a historic designation. And people will ask you about tear downs and you can be prepared to talk about those questions. And I'm sure like staff would help you.
At how
develop,
long?
Like, they're like a half hour?
Yeah,
So not
Huge
good.
half
So
an
not-
hour, yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable also.
They're
to
usually
go on
like
there.
Wednesdays at 11 or something. It's like a,
Oh,
yeah. a midday thing.
Well, one thing I haven't heard mentioned a lot is historic preservation tax credits. And the state of Missouri does have a tax credits program for non-income producing property as well as income producing property. And it can be for a single family owner occupied dwelling. And it, as you know, we're a certified local government, and even a house that has a CLG designation can be eligible for historic tax credits. And I've done a lot of really nice renovations with historic tax credits that would not have been economically feasible otherwise. And I just don't hear that talked up a lot. And I think if people knew it was available, that might be something that could kind of fuel preservation in our community if more people were aware of it.
Sorry, I was trying to find the city chats on here and I'm not immediately finding it.
I think traffic was the last one and it's been a little.
yeah, I think that's a good point, Carol, that
Yeah.
not a lot of people know that because it isn't the big federal benefit, but there is a benefit.
Yes, and it can be really quite substantial. I mean, people can do bigger projects or do a higher quality project than they might have originally planned. I mean, you know, it's we always tell people, yeah, there's paperwork to do and there's rules you have to follow, but these are the potential payoffs. And you know, I have never worked with a client on a historic tax credit project that hasn't been extremely pleased when the tax credits came through. It was certainly worthwhile. So I think that if people had more of an awareness of that, it might help dispel some of the misinformation about what you can and can't do with your own home. And it's a potential huge benefit to have and preserve and take care of an historic home.
Right. You know, one thing I often say when somebody, what if I tell someone I'm on the architectural review board and they make sort of a bad look like, and I don't mean a person here in Webster, I mean in general in the world, they look at it like, oh, you have to do one of those things. And I always say, well, most of us move into a community because we like the character, but we don't actually necessarily know how to keep that character. So it's really just helping people keep that character. And I like it described that way because it sounds better than we're preventing you from, we're trying to keep what you moved here for, maybe, And I think when it comes to tax credits, it's often or any building, when you're trying to get people to do it in a, for the Secretary of Interior standards, it's keeping the character that they like about the building. And they usually do realize that. I think most of the people I've worked with, often they realize it at the end of the day, even if they think they want it, they're like, oh, well, this works out great. It all fits in, and you think, of course it does. That's the plan.
And it really does help people. The guidelines help people from inadvertently doing things that would undermine the historic character and the historic value of their home. So oftentimes once people get involved, they really embrace that and they're like, oh, well, we're doing this for this reason. And, and also to, it's good for the house, it's good for the historic preservation character of the community. And also when there's a nice payday involved, embracing those guidelines is pretty appealing for a lot of people.
So just so you see, the last city chat was an hour long.
Yeah, I misspoke, sorry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the last city chat was an hour long.
I think I started in the middle of it.
If you scroll to the top of it, does it say how many people watched it?
No,
No.
because
When you're watching it live, it says like how many people are there.
yeah. So we don't, I don't have back access that would show how much. So I'm just going to, we're at 7:30. I know at a certain point, everyone kind of goes, okay, I want to make sure that you have time to talk about your old business and your projects and whether there's next steps you want to take with those. But if there was information that someone wants to take on about the city website, any, feedback that people want to provide that I can pass on to the people who update the page. Or if there's additional information that you want to do in a different way, if you want to keep it on for next meeting and then just discuss it at next meeting, I'll let you all decide.
I mean, personally, I want to discuss it at next meeting because I guess after discussing it a little bit here and now knowing kind of what information we might need to change or rework or whatnot, I kind of want to look into it a little bit more and be a little more prepared for the next meeting. And that's just my own fault because I wasn't at the last two. So
I agree. I think that, maybe between now and the next meeting, we can all kind of, anybody interested can look around on other websites, take a look at our new revised website and just kind of come up with some ideas that might further the whole idea of getting more information out there to people.
I can put it on the agenda as old business for next month. And then if there's anything else anyone needs on that. Okay.
okay, so that brings us to old business, which is our discussion of projects on Joy-Built Homes and Lustron Homes. And again, because I wasn't at the April meeting, and we didn't have a meeting last month, I guess I'm gonna kind of sit back to kind of get caught up on what you guys discussed last time.
And I think if you look in the minutes, you'll see that it was mainly drafting a letter, sharing some information for a spreadsheet, supplying a map of home locations, and then drafting a letter for Lustron and researching potentially other cities or benefits for Lustron. So we had a couple kind of action items, and I know in your packet there were a couple draft letters and some additional information on both those projects. So it was more just being able to talk through both of them and figure out what your next steps were.
I think it'd be really helpful to send these letters out, particularly on the Joyville homes. Because they're harder to identify.
What's the difference between the two letter versions?
One letter was from one member and another letter was from another member, just with some differences
Oh.
between them of, you know, keeping it super, super simple, but then in some cases, if it's too much information, might need to be a merge of the two.
So two authors. Okay.
Yeah.
I like the smaller version, might get the attention of someone.
Now, in order to send that letter out, we would have to schedule a meeting for them to attend. So I mean, I want to make sure that's really clear. Like we had the suggestion that we would have a meeting to talk about it. So if that is what you want to do, we would have to, you know, either say that we're going to have it at the next meeting or have it at a future meeting and make that determination. So, and be prepared to talk about what you want to do. So it's kind of a combination of, there's a bunch of different things. There's the letter. And then what is that letter accomplishing? Is that letter saying, would you like to be involved? Is that letter saying, is it really a public meeting, or is it a meeting that you all are going to invite them to the next HPC meeting and have it on the agenda to talk about people who want to get involved, or maybe do a subcommittee? So I think you've got to think about, there's a lot of pieces to this that we've talked about, but I don't think anyone's finalized on anything on like really what is your next step. And that's on both projects.
So you mean Lustron and Joyville?
Yeah, I mean, you can focus on one and then go to the other, but in both cases, sending the letter out is,
So is next, but but for the Lustron houses, we wouldn't have a meeting.
no, not necessarily.
'Cause it's kind of different.
Well, with the
Yes, it could.
Lustron, there was the conversation about nominating them.
Yeah.
And if you're going to nominate them, then you do have to hold a public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you gotta do the
That's a
full
whole
formal process.
Yeah.
The other one, I think, was more of a conversation of just a walk, whether it was a digital walk, whether it was some other type of walk. And that was a different conversation. It's not being nominated, but we kind of put in, I think in some of them, having a public meeting
Yeah.
to discuss. In both cases, you're going to figure out what is that meeting? Where is that meeting? Is it separate from your HPC meeting?
So oh, I see. So even though the Lustron House, we could send a letter long before the meeting is in the future, no matter what, still probably be good to let them know when we would be doing something like that. But if we had, okay, never mind. I guess it's the same.
Do we have now?
I'm sorry, it's in one of our old packets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw the 21, but
No, that's an old letter that we had, and it says there's 21 that were in Webster
Yeah.
Groves. Yeah, I think we're,
Original.
yeah, I think we're down to about 12. And there are, at least, since I've worked for the city, we've had at least 3, if not 4, that have been demolished.
Yeah, kind of recently.
Yes, recently 4 new homes.
Be hard to live
You can hang things up with magnets though.
in. You can, I know, just have to have. a
So,
You're the best.
just, sorry. Clicking on like Lustron Homes and bringing up the 21 documents that are there with the list, the 2022 update of how many have been removed. There's that first letter. Was that the original letter that was sent out to everybody?
Which one? There's a long one and there's a short one.
I guess the first letter that appears when you.
So I don't have the document in front of me.
Oh, sorry.
Is the original one? Okay, so is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs long?
Yes.
Okay, so the 6 paragraph long one is the original one that was sent out. And then there should be in your packet a new one that Angela had sent and crafted that was shortening it to try to focus a little bit more. Not get too in depth to all of the at one time, part of the reason why, and
Or the
Yeah.
person who blanks out after the first sentence.
yeah.
So this is your version,
Yes. And
and then this is the old version.
yes,
So this was already sent in the past, the long one?
it was never done.
Oh.
They started.
Yeah.
They
and
started
wrote the
the,
letter.
yeah.
but That never sent it
Okay.
out, so. Just to get to the gist of it. I mean, this one's much shorter. The only thing for the Joyville Homes, the only thing for this, one thing we were saying was. So maybe this could be 2 sentences instead of 1, where it has, if you'd be interested in participating or having your home featured. We were looking at, since there were so many homes, we would say, if you'd like to opt out, let us know. Otherwise, since most people live in these homes, they're old homes that everybody in Webster knows they live in an old house. They live in an old house, and most of us. So it's a lot of houses to have people telling us they want to be on it rather than the other way around. Might be easier. That's, I remember we had discussed that, but just reverse that.
Mhm.
But helping with the whole thing is a different thing.
Right.
Like if they want help. But that's the only comment I had on that, but
If we're going to mail this, I mean, I find this very interesting. Maybe we could do this as sort of like just an attachment to the letter, just to kind of, and then they don't
Some
have
of
to
the
read
history.
it. Yeah. They could
that's what
just-
I thought too, maybe.
Yeah.
A sheet that says history of the Lustron. So
Yeah.
they could say, or. read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, same for the Joyville, maybe you have like short, and then you have the story.
Yeah, a little bit of. What the
Yeah,
heck are they talking about? That's a good point. I guess we didn't do that, but nobody did anything. like that. But so we'd have to schedule the meeting. We'd have to decide. So we'd have to plan that with the city though, right? I
Well-
assume as a formal.
No, not necessarily. I mean, again, it comes down to you at any time can schedule additional subcommittee meetings. You can, if you want to add an additional meeting to your schedule, you have the ability to do all of those. It's just that we have to do the proper notification process. So I would need to check and make sure if you thought a number of people were coming, that we had the council chambers available. If you wanted it in here, like we'd have to book the room. If you wanted to do it just via Zoom, or just all of those things, those are all these different elements that we as staff have to make sure can happen. So you could all say, oh, well, we really want it on a Friday night at, 8 o'clock. And I could say to you, nope, it's not available. Or you
No
could
one
say,
can
well,
show up.
we all love Wednesdays at 5. Well, Wednesdays at 5 is court on two nights of the month. So it's just that kind of like, and what do you want to do at that meeting? Who's going to run that meeting? What are you going to talk about at that meeting? So just, we aren't at, I think we're
Right.
not at some of those
No.
points yet. And I think I think you all need to focus and figure out, we kind of talked about there was going to be maybe 2 subcommittees, a little bit of like that people were going to focus on some of these. And I think the hard part is when we only meet once a month, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But there might be others that, and we need to follow sunshine law request. We can't just, you can't just have, like, if you all decided, hey, we really need to have a separate meeting just on Lustrons. And if you all told me that 4 of you wanted to meet, I could get you the room. You could have it whenever you needed to, or I could set up a Zoom for you. We would set it up. We would put it on the calendar. So it's listed as public. But is anyone necessarily going to attend? Probably not. But we just have to follow those procedures. So just knowing what you want to do and getting it scheduled is kind of.
So for the Lustron houses, since there's only so many, it doesn't seem as big a deal, but like the Joyville Homes, and
Oh, wow.
there's 100 or more homes. How many, Steve, how many are there? There's,
I don't even know. I don't have a count. There
I don't-
there are a jillion. Let's put it plus
So
or
we-
minus a jillion.
If we sent out a letter to that many people, I mean, I don't think we could really have a meeting here. It would feel,
Well,
Well, so
probably not very many will show, but
but
So-
yeah.
yeah.
right now on
Even
this,
10 people would be kind of a lot.
right now on this list are 124, I think. If that's what it's correctly, it looks like there's a number at the bottom. But I might be wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an accounting,
Plus or minus.
yes, plus or minus a jillion.
What about if we send a letter and we didn't say there's gonna be a public meeting and just gauge their interest?
Or in the future,
Yeah,
we'll let you know.
yeah,
Or would you be interested in, or?
yeah.
Well, that's true too. We can ask. If you're
I guess you could
interested.
do like a survey too.
Letting you all decide.
I should probably.
I think that's a good idea because then
Yeah.
we could send out the letter and see if people say anything.
Yeah,
They get in an uproar, they're gonna do it. Or
Yeah, like-
excited or
Yeah.
nothing.
So are we gonna ask for some kind of response when we send out the letter, or we're just gonna sit and wait and see if they spontaneously combust?
Well, I was thinking, we could, like here where it says, if you're
Yeah.
interested in participate, like
Okay.
going in the walk. If you don't say anything, but if
Just
you're
email
interested in
us.
participating or coming to a public meeting, please let us know at this and maybe. We could tell them a variety, or well, actually, that's probably just one thing. It's probably the best way to do it. But,
I mean, you can also ask if, would they like to be put on a mailing list for a future meeting? And if so, can they provide an email address? I mean, there's probably a lot of different things that you think about. But I think
Yeah.
you guys need to make a decision on that sort of direction that you want to go.
Are you comfortable receiving these
Well,
emails?
That's why I set it up to, you may email us at planning@webstergrovesmo.gov. That's a separate email address that we've been using when we were doing some of our larger public hearings.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's monitored to a certain extent. We haven't gotten much in there at all recently, so I just need to change like a setting on my screen that lets me know when something comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I right now have it just hidden because it's just one more thing to look at.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm fine with, because it really can't go to one of you personally. It's gotta come
Right.
through
Yeah.
the city. And there's some options, there's options, like right now we have an option on the website where you can sign up to receive reminders whenever the planning commission meets and has a public hearing. There's reminders that you can, if there's a public hearing before the city council, you can automatically sign up to get a reminder. We could ask whether they could set something up for something like that. I mean, there's so many different ways we could probably do this. It just comes down to,
Make a decision.
when do you want a meeting? Do you want a meeting? Do you want to just invite people to attend a future HPC meeting? Do you want to give them a couple options of, do you want to just be notified when we next meet to talk about this? I guess there's a lot of options.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I guess it goes back to if we mail out all of these letters and we give them all these options to follow along or, join our meetings or whatnot, how do we track who is doing that from the letters that we sent? Like, I feel like there's got to be some kind of unique way that we can track, okay, this is one of the people that received one of our, 145 letters or.
So the planning at webstergrovesmo.gov is not a general email that's just out there for anyone to use. I mean, literally, we used it for like all the public comments from Douglas Hill, so we could keep track of those, but they weren't all mixed with my emails. So, I mean, right now, there's nothing going into there. So if that's what we wanted to use, that's a very easy way to track. It's not a general thing that people are gonna just randomly find. Unless you put it on the website that you want to open it up to the world, that anyone who's interested.
Yeah. It feels like we need to have some sort of feeler. I mean, Steve's had an interest in it being in the house. Do you have a sense? Do you think we'll get 10 people respond? 15?
I would not be able to guess what the response is going to be, quite honestly. Everybody talks about Joy Homes. nobody seems to know anything about them. Does that make sense? There's not a list of them anywhere aside from what I put together that I can tell. And that only covers the last 20 years of building, not the first 20 years. So I have no idea how big a deal it is and what the perception is publicly.
Mhm.
Do we have, all the information, this is a lot of letters to send them. So do we have all the information to know who to send them to?
So usually we do them to the, like when we do mailings, so that we don't get it returned, we don't put a person's name. We actually put to owner occupants, so that way, when it says owner occupant, then it at the least will go, because it gets returned to us if we put a specific name and that person no longer lives there. And because it's, I mean, we could put owner occupant of a Joy built home. I mean, we can change the mailing labels to be whatever we want.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Because owner occupant can get thrown away pretty easy.
yeah,
Mhm.
but we can say owner occupant of a Joy built home. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think that the mailman would necessarily send it away as long as we have the right address and zip code.
Well, and so is like the envelope coming from City of Webster Groves?
Yeah, it would come from the city.
Which, I mean, in my opinion, I would open it. It being, you know, living in Webster Groves and getting something from the city, even if it didn't have my name on it. That's not something you get every day.
It's true. I like the idea of owner occupant of a Joy built home. It makes it seem important.
Intriguing, seem like.
Yeah, it makes you feel like, what are they talking about?
So, okay, we don't have a finalized letter at this point, correct? It's just what we want to do, if we want to send out a feeler or go
You have
beyond.
a couple drafts. So we had asked, and I had asked that people take on some tasks. So, you know, you had two different potential draft letters that came in. So I put both of them in the packet. But again, you know, if other people want to merge the two together or think of some other ideas or make some changes, whatever it is that you need. Once we have clarification that that's the direction you want to go in, I've got a list with addresses that we can use, but it's just what is going to be in that letter, and whatever's in that letter before I send it out, we need to verify if we are going to just invite them to the next meeting, or if we're going to wait and you're going to do more things and invite them after, you know, a lot of people are gone in the summer. You always kind of think about, when would you want that meeting to be? Do you want that meeting to be in the month after that everyone comes back for school? So is it the September HPC meeting? And if it is, what do you have prepared? What do you have ready? Always knowing that if we hold it that night, we might still get 3 house demolitions. We could get a certificate of appropriateness. Whatever it is, we're not going to necessarily know. We need to think about that. That's going to be important to think about.
Well, and Mara, also, like, if we're talking about sending out a feeler letter first, which would see what kind of a response we get, and then we would send out a follow-up letter. I mean, how does that work with budget? Like, do we have?
Well, so let's go back to, we will not send out multiple letters. The first letter would be a letter that says, you know, do you want us to continue to contact you? And if so, give us an email address. I mean, like, that's about as much as we're going to, yeah, I mean, this is already a pretty large amount, but we'd be able to mail those out. We've been cutting down on mailings in a lot of other areas by sending things via email. But I mean, I guess, again, here's what I'm thinking, is that I think everyone needs to think about all these ideas that you've started discussing. Set it for the next meeting and have a plan of action, like make some decisions at the next meeting, which I think not everyone was ready to make today. And I think having these letters in front of you, how, trying to think about what you want to do and merge together. And then if we are going to hold a meeting, like a formal meeting, who's going to present? What are you presenting? Just having all that ready, it's a lot of steps. But thinking about that of like, when would we hold it? Are we holding it in September for the September meeting or October? And if you are, then that gives you time to prepare. Is there a PowerPoint that shows like what you're thinking about doing? Is there, just showing some of the images, but getting those images and putting them together, having the map on there, but what are you sharing with them about what your next steps are and how to get them involved or not involved?
So I have a question. If there's like 100 of these homes, how are we gonna do a historic walk?
So the idea was that this would not be a walk like our walk books like we used to do.
Okay.
That it would be something more. So there are different ways that you can do apps on phones now that tie to GIS mapping. So we actually have a historic map that right now you can you can go into your phone and you can click on the different dots on the map. And it just gives you a little bit of information on right now, the age of the home, and some basic information. And so there is that possibility. There's all these new technologies with GIS mapping that you can have. You can add photos in, you can add information in, you can do other things related to it, but we haven't had the volunteers to do the work necessarily. There is someone from the Historical Society who went in and took all of our historic walks and did a voiceover. So he has an audio to it now and added some additional information. And we've actually linked it. See if I can share the screen again. And I'm not sure exactly where it is. We'll see if I can find it. It was recently added because he had shared it with all of you. This would be before somebody came on.
With the walks.
Don't think remember if it's with the walks, not the tour or shores. I'm trying to remember where. Oh wait. That's the brochures.
Oh, there's recorded, the heart of Webster.
No, that's just we did have one by Don Marsh years ago who did one of them, but there was another link, and I know that Jenny Starkey added it. You start
There. Oh, let's just get information.
yeah, it just takes us right. I'll have to find out where she put it. But she added this one that was being done by the Historical Society, by a volunteer of the Historical Society. And I just can't remember. It's brand new that she just added it, and I don't know where she's put it. So I'll have to find out where it went. But he has a page where he's done, you can, on your phone, you can go to that page and you can click and listen to the audio recording of the walk. And we talked about how trying to tie that to the GIS mapping system. We don't have a GIS person anymore right now at the city. So I don't have necessarily there's not a person to necessarily do that. There's someone in IT who, if we have some basic information, we might be able to give it to them and they could throw it into the program and it creates the map. But we'd have to just, again, it's like, what are our next steps before we even get to that point? Is that what we want to do? I don't think anyone's made a decision yet.
To me, it's like two separate missions that won't follow the same path. If we're looking at the Lustrons and a possible landmark designation, and wanting to get an idea of interest of these owners about their interest in having a landmark designation is an entirely different mission than the Joy Built Walk. So I don't think they're going to be the same steps. To me, it's a bigger bite to pursue the 120 some odd letters and start thinking about putting together the walk. To me, it seems like, even though it is a bit of a process, we've got fewer Lustron homeowners and there's a more defined path to the designation process. So if we were to say, just to get something going here, focus on the Lustrons, Mara, what would be the way the city would handle this? And I'm sure, Angela, you're probably really well versed in this too. Would we get an idea of the owners who were interested in a potential designation and then hold a meeting for them? And would it be a situation where the designation would be pursued even if all of the owners weren't on board? I mean, those are the kinds of things I think we would need to know, so we would be able to craft the approach appropriately and be able to give people an idea of what the process would be, and whether or not the city would be undertaking it, or whether they as individuals, what would they have to do if they were interested or not. That to me would be some mechanics that we would need to determine before
So that's nothing you need to determine. The code is very specific in exactly how you follow that process.
Okay.
So that I can send you all the link or the code sections, but the code sections have a very specific how the nomination is made. You all as a group can determine that you want to nominate an area. You then have to notify the property owners. So, I mean, there's a step for, do you want to get them on board? But there's also a step where you don't necessarily have to get them on board. When they get to the hearing, if they have an opposition, they can make that opposition known. And then when they get to the city council at that level, they can make their opposition known. So the last one that was done, and I can probably give you all the last like minutes and other things, we did the Marshall Commercial Historic District, which is that little commercial area up near Maypop. It actually was one that I really wasn't involved in because the HPC worked with one of my staff on it. But basically you make the decision that that's what you're going to do. You follow this whole series of steps as to why it should be designated. You hold a public hearing, you notify the property owners. There's just steps in here of what you follow. So the letter was more to try to get them involved ahead of time, back when they were attempting to do that early on, but you're not required to. I mean, it's important, but it's not you notify people and you let them know, but they don't have to necessarily be all on board.
Okay.
It works better if they're on board.
Right.
But you don't have to do that.
Yeah, well, I've just been involved in one of these. It was an extension of an existing district, and yeah, most of the people, I would say 3/4 plus were on board, and it did go through. So I personally would be interested in knowing the mechanics that you were just mentioning, Mara. So that would help us determine what work we would have to do and what our schedule would need to be. And then, you know, once we have for me personally, I would like to know a little bit more about that so we can get a feel for the tasks and what a reasonable timeline would be. So when we do notify people, we have a plan and we're organized. So knowing what the procedure that we would need to follow per the city code would be very helpful.
Okay.
One thing that I would like to know, I'm more familiar with National Register nominations, which is a lengthy form.
Much lengthy form, more lengthy form, yes.
And what do you do for Webster?
It's-
It's nothing. We just say, here's the address and that's that.
No,
Or-
we do have, and again, I can go back and show you the last one that we did.
That would be- yeah, that would
I
be-
can give that as an example. I can show that as an example, but there was a lot of information that was provided that people had looked up on the commission. So the commission members had taken on finding some of the history, providing some of the documentation. There was a whole series of documentation that was provided. The hearing then said, we have this document and this document and this document, and each of those was put on as the information that was required in order to make that nomination. But it's not the same as the national form in any way, shape, or form. It was more just, we're providing, these things to show why it meets the criteria. So it was really more, does it meet the criteria? And that's what they did. They just have a series for
So
local.
what does it do? So what does it not do then? Because I mean, the National Register form is really all. It's just has a particular form to it, more than anything. That's all that information is on a form. But so we just don't have a particular
We don't have a form.
but we provide all the same information.
Very similar information,
Yeah.
correct? Yes.
I mean, there's only so much to say.
Yeah, there's only so much.
Significance.
Here's the history, here's the significance, here's some photos of the buildings.
Right.
Here's some old maps.
Yeah.
Here's the plat of where it was located. But yeah, I can provide you all with that last one.
Okay.
That was done as a smaller historic district.
Okay, because that is the also benefit of the Lustron Homes. We have all of the National Register forms that do the whole entire history of Lustron Homes. That's not an issue. We just need the history of specifically the Webster homes. But I don't think that's going to be exactly earth-shattering information. So yeah, I agree with Carol. It makes it a very different process when we have this handful of people and the information has been done before, you might say, whereas Joy Built is unique. Stephen's kind of the expert because no one else even has done all this. So
one
it's
really
very
quick,
different.
we're getting close to losing our quorum. Because I know Michael just wrote that he has to run. So it is almost 10 minutes after 8. So I guess the question that I have, Anne, is that, I think you all as a group need to decide, what do you want on the next agenda? Do you want to focus on the city website and the Lustron on the next agenda? Do you want to still continue to discuss the Joy Built in a different way that might be the longer process?
So I
what you
think
would-
here's what I'm feeling. I feel like we've discussed Lustron and Joy Built Homes. We all agree that Stephen did a lot of research and cool information that we were ready to take on that project, but Lustron never really dropped off because there's always interest in that too. I think without having additional help with subcommittees, it feels like we're spinning our wheels still. And in order at this time in the year to get something done, I feel like we need to focus on one or the other and make that our priority, because I think we just have too much that we're continuously talking about and nothing's really getting done. So I think we need to make a decision on that. And I'm not saying that like whatever one we table for now, we don't pick back up later on. And maybe this is a project, we have new members. Some of us have never gone through a project like this. Maybe we find a process through one of these, and maybe it is Lustron because letters have already been sent out. We have a smaller list of homes. It's a little bit smaller. Sorry, I have a 5-year-old coming in here. It's a little bit smaller of a project to tackle, and maybe we can like learn from that and apply that to the Joy Built Homes as our next project, because I think we can all agree that's equally important, but will probably take a little bit more time.
Yeah, I agree that with what Mara has provided us with the information that we do have a framework, it seems like we have a cleaner, clearer, shorter path between where we are and where we want to be on the Lustrons. So maybe we can focus on that first, and in the meantime, everybody can be kind of percolating their ideas about the Joy Built walk. And once we kind of get the Lustron going, and maybe everybody can, independently take a look at the city's website and have their suggestions. those are two areas where we can move forward at concentrating on the Lustron.
Do we need a vote on that or anything?
No, you don't necessarily need to vote on it. I just need to know a direction so I can put the agenda get together next month and provide you with whatever information you need, whether it's the process for, and examples for doing the historic district, whether it's some additional examples for how to do like the digital walk, whatever that is, I just need to know what to provide you all for the next meeting.
Well, I agree that we should maybe get our feet wet with the Lustron Homes before we tackle the Joy Built Homes project.
Yeah.
And I guess, like, what is our goal with the Lustron Homes? And do we want to make it another walk? Do we want to try to
No, we're
historically?
gonna nominate them.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think once we have our clear goals of what we want to do with that project, I think that's what we keep on the agenda and go through that process, because I think that's going to be a really good learning experience moving forward with, especially if, like Carol said, we have this month from now until our next meeting to review the website, review the historic designation list. How can we make that more accessible for people, which might make things easier in the future? So I think we keep those definitely on the agenda.
Yeah, and that information that Mara was mentioning about the mechanics that the city code requires for the designation would be really helpful for me personally to help get my mind around the tasks that we need to tackle and how we need to organize them.
I can provide those.
Okay, with that said, our next meeting is July 12th. Do we have a motion to dismiss?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second.
All those approved?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thanks all.
Thank you guys and welcome
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thanks for joining and
Thank you.
welcome Emily. We're happy to have you guys.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.